7:30 it is then. We'll call the meeting to order, and Mike Speltz can vote for Tiffany. And first up is Emily.
Hey, everybody.
Right.
I was here a couple years ago talking, so it's nice to see you all again. And some of you may have heard this presentation. I gave this at the town council last month, which is why the date says April. So it's the same presentation from then. But if you have any questions along the way, feel free to stop me. So I'm Emily DeFranco. I'm a project manager and senior scientist from Comprehensive Environmental. We are a consulting company that has been hired by the town for a couple different projects. And we just are finishing up one of these projects, so I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. All right, so just to remind you of what I was here talking about last time, in 2019, we did a water resource management and protection plan, basically. And the goal of that was really to update the town, update the town's water resources data. Look at, what are your surface water resources, your groundwater resources, where do you get your drinking water, that type of things, and provide recommendations to enhance sort of like your water resource management efforts. So that was the goal of it was a larger comprehensive plan that we did on the town-wide level. Some of the things that came out of it, one of the things was, as a next step, was to conduct an assessment of septic systems. And that's really what brought us to this next step that I'm going to talk about today. So most residents in Londonderry rely on a private septic system to deal with their wastewater. About, of the 6,400 or so developed parcels that you have, about 90% of them rely on private septic systems. And that's really just very common in the state of New Hampshire. If we don't have a lot of public sewer, and where we do have it, it's in more of like the concentrated downtown areas, and that's it. So it's not uncommon, but you can see in the map, the brown is the properties that are connected or have access to public sewer, and the green are properties that do not have access, so therefore we assume that they're on septic. And when I say assume they're on septic, it's because we don't have great records yet to show who is on septic and who is not. So that's where part of this will go. A little background on septic systems, just so we're all talking the same language here. A conventional septic system, it's basically a tank, a tank that's connected to your house, like a holding tank, and that really provides a settling area out to sort of like an effluent area, or a leach field, which would essentially treat effluent as it gets filtered through the soil, through a bunch of different processes, like bacterial breakdown, that type of thing, of all of the pollutants you don't want in your groundwater, like bacteria, nutrients, that type of thing. So that if you have a septic system that is working correctly and is properly maintained and is not really old, the soil, the way that they're installed, the soil should be able to treat all of the big pollutants that we care about before it reaches your groundwater. And the reason we really care about that is because that groundwater, you can see sort of the blue arrows going down below a leach field, is connected to any, dug drinking water well as well. So that's really, you want that water to be as clean as it can be. So if those septic systems are not working as they should, it's going to pollute the groundwater, which will then pollute your drinking water. So that's why we care. That's really the background on what we're talking about. So as a next step after the 2019 Water Resources Management Plan, we look to see what can we do that's sort of a tangible next step. A lot of the things that come out of a plan like that are really big picture items, but we really wanted to see what could we apply for a grant for to get some grant money, and what is a small enough task that is doable as a next step to kind of keep this moving forward. So with Amy Kizak, we applied for a New Hampshire DES source water protection grant because we knew that this would be a place that we could actually get a decent sum of money to do some of the next step work. And basically it was a couple different things. We wanted to develop sort of an environmental risk assessment, which I'll talk about that in the next slide in just a second about what that means. And then also to create a septic system database. And the first task there, the environmental risk assessment, was not funded by the Source Water Protection Grant. That was funded separately directly by the town, but it did count as match toward the Source Water Protection Grant. So that Source Water Protection Grant really funded the creation of the septic system database, which we'll talk about. And then also outreach, which is going to be part of the grant as well. All right, so the environmental risk assessment, again, this is for septic systems within the town of Londonderry. We wanted to look at areas of the town that were more at risk of septic system failure. Doesn't have anything to do with the type of septic system you put in or even the age of septic system. We're looking at soil and environmental factors only. So, where are areas in town where there's not a lot of depth to groundwater, where it's a little, or, the bedrock is pretty shallow bedrock, for instance. Also environmental factors. Where are areas of town that would have a septic system that is relatively close to a water body or wetland, or septic or parcels in town that are within like a FEMA flood zone? So those are sort of the big picture things that we were looking at. And this is just to show you, we had basically were able to break it down into 3 different tiers. That all 3 tiers would assume that, the parcels on septic systems, but that's in there as well. Tier 1 would be the most at risk because they have limited soils, they're in a flood zone, and they're within 100 feet of a water body or wetland. So those are sort of the more, it's not the ideal place to put a septic system, but sometimes you have to put it there because you don't have a choice, so you have to put something there. But still, that parcel would be one we'd want to note was an at-risk parcel. Tier 2 would be the same thing, except it's not in a FEMA flood zone. And Tier 3 would be any other parcel within the town of Londonderry that does not have any of those limiting factors. So that's just like a regular parcel. So that's what we looked at. That's how we broke it down. And when we were looking at everything within the town, of the 5,700 parcels on septic systems, about 1,370 were either in Tier 1 or Tier 2. So that means that they at least had limited soils and were within, were in within 100 feet of a water body or wetland. Some of them were not necessarily in that FEMA flood zone. And the rest of the parcels were in Tier 3. So that's where then the grant kicks in. So that work we'd done up to this point was part of that town-funded piece. And we did that in order to prioritize how we create this septic system database. Creating the database is a lot of work, so we didn't want to, bite off more than we could chew by saying we'd do a comprehensive 5,000 parcel database. So we did this risk assessment to say where are the most at-risk parcels, and then let's take a closer look at those parcels. So this is where the Source Water Protection Grant jumps in here. There's a lot of information on this, but I just wanted you to see that we weren't able to do a septic system database for all of the parcels in Tier 1 and Tier 2. We had to limit it to what DES calls source water protection areas. So that's anywhere that's like basically a public drinking water supply. So any property not on a private well, essentially. So it takes our 1,370 properties down a little bit smaller. But within those, our next step was to create a septic system inventory or database. So the current method to track septic system installation and replacement at the town level, not just Londonderry, but most towns, looks like that picture. It's just a file on a shelf in the building department. And that's not unusual. That's just how it's always been. But there's no electronic database whatsoever. So there's really no way to track other than going to that file to see, was there ever an application that was put in to upgrade somebody's septic system or not? So that's basically what we were developing. So based on that prioritized list of parcels, we created an electronic tracking system. The idea would be for use when, if somebody wanted to review a building application, or if you were purchasing a home and you wanted to know the last time the septic system was replaced, it would be much more easily accessible. And it also is the basis if there are ever at any point a time for a septic system regulations, which some towns have done, which I'll talk about at the end. This is the beginning of that, because you need to know if your septic systems are being replaced, essentially. So again, you don't need to be able to read this, but I just wanted to show you sort of what it looked like. It's essentially the parcels. We have the basic information for the parcels, the address, the year the house was built. And then we had a lovely intern, Amy had a lovely intern last year who went through those paper files for all of those parcels. And they were able to fill in if there was any record within their building file of a septic replacement. If there was not, then we noted that as well, and it's essentially assumed then that it hadn't been replaced since the house was built. And that is also very common. The state of New Hampshire also does have an electronic tracking system for permits that are, basically applied through them as well. So we did go through the state records, and if there were any records of replacement, we noted those as well in the septic database. So that's sort of the updated place.
So,
Yes.
excuse me, but this database exists.
Now it does.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
right, for the however many property, how many properties are in
It
it?
ended up being 736.
Okay, so, and that is ongoing? I mean, we have a process in place to,
We are putting a process in place to make sure that we can continue to update that for all those other parcels that were not included in this initial 736.
meet those three sort of criteria.
Yeah, and that was part of this, was I've met with Amy, and Amy has actually organized the building department, and, I forget who else was at that meeting, DPW, and, just to make sure there was a process in place for when new applications come in, that database gets updated.
Right.
So it's not just gonna be sort of a static thing. The hope now, it was made in a way to keep it simple enough that it could be updated as new applications come in. And also for Amy to, if she gets another intern this summer, or at some point down the road, use somebody like that to go
Add
through the
some
old
more.
records and complete the database.
Right.
So the skeleton framework is there, the beginning of it's done. It's just, sort of up to the town to continue it as it goes. And it's not being dropped. We presented this to town council, who seemed very interested in keeping it going and seeing it as a resource that was a good resource. And Amy and the building department have been working to sort of come up with that plan to do it.
So where does it live?
It's gonna live within my data sets, and building is gonna have access to it. And we're working on a methodology so that it's not falling on any one person to make sure everything gets updated. Building department is probably going to take on anything new coming in, they're gonna add it to the data. And if we have interns, I'll use them to go through the old files and pull any of the old information. That's the current plan that we're working on setting up. So we have a plan.
And forgive me for asking it again, but the difference between the 700 and the 1,300 is those 500 are not 600,
Yeah.
are not in a SWAPA, is that
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And we had to do that because of the grant source, the
Yeah,
grant funding
right,
source that we
right.
had, and the limitation of how much time the intern had this summer. It was a mix of both. I think we probably we might have even gone beyond the grant, but I mean, that it takes a while to go through those, and then she had to update it directly into the database, and then we had to QA/QC it. So that was really why we were limited to that area, but we felt like that was a good place to start. It gave us a reason to, you need a place to start. So that's if you're limited by grant funding, that's an okay reason, I think, so. All right, so just to give you a summary of what we found when we went through the septic records, just to show why this is also an important exercise. So we ended up looking at about 736 parcels. So those are the tier 1 and 2 parcels within the source water protection areas. So that's, 736. The parcels with a record of replacement, there were about 702. So that's great. That means at some point during the time somebody has owned that house, it has been replaced. But this is where, what I always say, oh, that's not great. Most of the parcels, 547 that had records of replacement, were replaced more than 20 years ago. Shelf life for a regular conventional septic system is 20 to 30 years. And that's if it's being maintained properly and if it's put in a place that it can be maintained properly. These are, again, in the areas that already have soil and environmental limitations. So they could be in a flood zone, they could be next to a wetland, whatever it is. So, and this is not unusual. This is not a Londonderry problem. This is a state-wide, countrywide problem, anywhere with septic system problem. Septic systems work as they're designed to do, but it's, becomes a homeowner responsibility. And if a lot of times, honestly, homeowners don't even necessarily know that they have a septic system and that where it is, what they need to do about it, when it's been replaced. So it's underground, so it's out of sight. And until there's a problem, until it backs up into their house or their yard gets flooded, it's not something they think about. It's not even an intentional not thinking about. They just don't know about it. So that's where some of the education is going to come into play, which I'll talk about. But this is really telling. I mean, of that subset of all the homes in Londonderry on septic, most of them they're old. And, that's, again, not uncommon. But that also means the technology from more than 20 years ago, which is a lot less, efficient as it is if they had a new system put in today. So, okay, so there's that. So the next piece from this was to develop a basic education and outreach program that could be built on over time. We presented to the town council. We wanted to present to you guys as well. And then we wanted to use, not develop new there's a million septic system brochures, how to pump and maintain your system. So we basically just pulled those together. And right now, Amy is basically, we wrote a cover letter and we're sending out a brochure to everybody in those tier 1 and tier 2 neighborhoods as a start. We did this study, your property was found to be in one of these environmental and soil limited areas, and here's some information on your septic system. It's not saying they need to do anything, it's just showing them they have a septic system and that they need to do something about it, basically. So that's the beginning of it. The hope as a next step would be to complete the septic system inventory for the rest of the town. There's been 5,000-ish properties that have not been assessed at all. And so that's what we were just talking about with Amy about, we have a plan for new permit applications, but also for the older ones as well, to be able to go through those files. And then the last piece would be, this is a down the road thing, but you really have to do something like this to ever consider a regulatory change. And I'll talk, a little bit about a couple towns that have done that in New Hampshire, so it's not unprecedented. It's not that common, but it's also not unprecedented. So currently the state regulations, that's what most towns in New Hampshire follow. Towns will just follow whatever the state says. That's what's written into their, their site plan regulations or whatever it is. You should be set back from a surface water about 75 feet, wetlands 50 to 75 feet. Your leach field should be 4 feet above the seasonal high water table, and then it requires maintenance and replacement if failing. And that's it. Those are the three things, basically, which is fine. I mean, it's a place to start. Those are all rational things. All of these things you can apply for a waiver to go around if you need to. But those are really the basic regulations that Londonderry has right now. So really, it's just a place to start, if you think of it that way. A couple communities that I've worked with that have put in, that have basically adopted regulatory changes on the municipal level, both cases had to do more with, the first one is Meredith, New Hampshire. They were getting cyanobacteria blooms in the lake. They did a bunch of studies, and we were pretty sure it was septic systems. I mean, it made a lot of sense. These old lake communities, they don't even have septic systems in many of those properties. It's just an old holding tank, perhaps, that type of thing. So they basically passed a health ordinance, which is how they were able to get this through their town. And it had a lot of backing because everybody there wants to be able to use the lake, their property values, they want to keep them up. So they had a lot of local support as well. But basically it requires the evaluation of all septic systems within 250 feet of the lake. Not just an evaluation the way we did. They already had that, we basically did this type of inventory for them. But it was an evaluation where they had to hire a septic evaluator essentially to come out and evaluate their system and make sure it was working and submit the paperwork to the town. And that was a beginning, basically. And that is just, they wanted to make sure they were catching the low-hanging fruit. If you're failing, if you don't have the proper system in place, you have to get it in place. So that was something that went in. They basically you would apply basically for a septic permit that way in a different capacity. Another community I worked with, Rye, they had beach closures, and all septic systems, and they have very limited soils. They have in some areas 18 inches between the soil and the seasonal high water table, and they have to deal with the tides. So there's no good place. But it was a non-starter to talk about sewer in that community. There just would have been too expensive to do that. So you deal with what you get, that's what you have, and what are you going to do with it? They basically adopted more stringent design criteria. So instead of the 4 feet seasonal high water table, it's 18 inches to 24 inches, depending on where you are. And it wasn't town-wide. It was just for watersheds that were impaired. So they have a couple different tidal rivers that are impaired for bacteria. So they basically drew the watershed onto the map, and that was sort of their overlay of areas that had these more stringent septic rules, essentially. And they also put a pump-out ordinance for that overlay district as well. So that basically requires all tanks to be pumped every 3 years in those areas of town. And they were able to do that because they had this septic database in place. And so once they have that infrastructure, you can do things like put in a pump-out ordinance where it just becomes sort of an automated thing over time. It takes a while to get things up and going. But really in this case, a pump-out ordinance like this, it's not something that the homeowners have to do anything. I mean, they have to get their tanks pumped, but the septic haulers essentially submit their septic records to the town, and it gets updated that way. So it's really no work on the homeowner's part except just the regular maintenance. And that was not really that heavily contested either, because they were having beach closures, and and their property values, same thing. It's property values, beach closures, that type of things. But it's also drinking water. In this town, we would care more. We'd be looking at it, making sure there's a lot of properties here on private wells. We'd want to make sure that, that was the message that we were showing. This is why we care about these things. And in Rye also, now anytime anybody applies for any kind of like site plan, when they're going, basically when they're putting in their site plans for development, they're all putting in advanced treatment systems for septic systems. They're all designing for the 18-inch to 24-inch criteria. They just know that's what they have to do at this point. So it's not a push. Like, it's not a hard, now that's just what you do there. It's kind of like that. So it takes a while to get it going, but once it's in place, it just becomes normal. So that's why we care here, is the private wells and the groundwater issue for the drinking water. And that was a lot all at once. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to go back to any slide or take any questions you might have.
This would seem to be something a new home buyer would want to know if they're
Yes.
buying a house, so.
Yeah, so in Massachusetts, they have that. They have the Title V regulations there. We don't have anything like that here. So at least there's something with transfer of property. We don't have that in New Hampshire as a state law. So, that's another thing that, towns have played around with, is at least putting that in at the municipal level, during transfer of property, that you at least have to have an evaluation, and so that's something you can do as well.
When you briefed the town council, did they give any guidance to the town manager or to the planners on next steps?
They didn't give specific guidance, but they were very in favor of continuing to develop the database.
Yep.
So we have good encouragement to proceed with that.
But not necessarily any regulatory changes?
Not yet.
I think that would be a little bit farther down the road,
yeah.
with a little bit more. It could even be as the database is developed, we pull more of those numbers, like the 500 or so properties that have septic systems over 20 years old. If we come back with a number like 4,000,
Change it.
75% or something of all the septic system, something like that, that would be a time then that would be another chance to go talk to the town council and push something like that, or request something like that. But that's, how regulations go. And septic system regulations are something you just have to be careful with, because it can be a lot of pushback from homeowners, honestly. I mean, it's something else they might have to do, and it can be expensive. Septic systems are expensive. So it takes a while to get to that point. So we'd have to build up to it, I think, slowly.
What you've talked about a lot is what was the traditional Londonderry home, single family on an acre with a well and a septic. In the last 10 to 15 years, we've got a number of developments with very high density housing with town water but septic.
Yep.
Does that have to be treated differently? It seems like it would.
It does. It has to be treated differently in this, yes and no. I mean, it has to, the tank in the system has to be big enough to accommodate whatever the capacity of the building is, of course. But there are studies that show the density of septic systems in an acre or something like that. As those go up, the chance of them failing also increase, because there's just not enough treatment area, essentially. Even though there is within an effluent leach field, by that plume that comes still coming down, there's just not enough area to treat everything. So
we might want to add that to the concern then.
yeah. No, that's a good.
Good point, Bob. Do you have an idea what a homeowner would pay for an evaluation?
It depends. Like $250 probably, I'd say. There have been in Meredith. It might have been Meredith, but it might have not been. It was another lake community. It was not Meredith. It was another lake community. They got a. Are you guys familiar with the New Hampshire 319 grants at all? It's a New Hampshire. It's basically if you have a watershed-based plan for a water body. So that means you've done this EPA approved plan. that's impaired for something, you can apply for 319 implementation fund. So it's basically implementing something that you said you wanted to have done in your watershed plan.
Right.
And it can be used, it's often used to do like a stormwater, like a rain garden program, that kind of thing. But whatever town that was, and I'm blanking on the town, it was one of the lake communities in New Hampshire, they used that money, they applied and used that money to fund septic evaluations for a certain number of homeowners. And a different community basically started like a pot of money through that 319 program to refund homeowners up to $5,000 towards replacement if it was found that their evaluation was failing, that their septic system was failing. So it's very tough to get money for septic systems, but there are ways to do it, to make it feel a little bit more palatable to residents as well, to show you're sort of working with them. So there's precedent for things like that. But yeah, it can be expensive even just to do the evaluation, but less expensive than replacing your septic system. So.
Right. The last time we did a project, when we did the management project, we talked about the fact that some of our watersheds are impaired and that there's really not a good funding source to create the plan as opposed to getting the 319 funds. But this sounds like another reason to do a plan.
I know, and I was looking at your water bodies again, and there's not, I mean, you don't have a lot of like nutrient impairments or bacteria impairments. You do have one pond, I can't remember which one it is, and I apologize, that has a chloride impairment or a salt impairment, and New Hampshire is starting to fund, it's sort of a newer, the chloride watershed-based plans are not very typical, but New Hampshire is starting to want them to become typical. So that might be one we could consider, because even though we're talking about, when you're doing a watershed plan, if it's about chloride or nutrients, whatever it is, a lot of the sources of pollutants are similar. So you're talking about, all kinds of things. Yeah.
Would that maybe be Wheeler Pond? Because that's the one that's right at exit 4.
That feels like
and
it- I
right
think it
on the
is.
highway, which
Yeah.
has been getting salt for,
And that, and that a
decades.
lot of that source is going to be from DOT,
Yeah.
and roads. But that, but there's, I think it'd be worth exploring. How else could we do it? But also exploring other funding sources. Maybe 319 is not the way to go. Maybe it's a different, like the Source Water Protection Act or the Source Water Protection Grant money, because you do have so many different source water protection areas. That was, we could continue on that sort of trajectory for using that, next step in that funding source as well. And I can talk with Amy about other ones that might be available for things like this, because it is worth, trying to dig those out, because some of these projects to get us started are not huge projects, but they can have a big benefit in the end, Yep.
so would you be looking to the Conservation Commission to sponsor some of these projects? Or would it be more town building and planning?
I think depending on what the project was, I mean, I think town council would want the Concom support for anything for this type of project, for sure. But most of the time I'd say, well, I don't know that it would matter so much, Conservation Commission versus town council for some of the New Hampshire DES grants. I've worked with both. I've worked with Conservation Commission as like the primary grantee. So it could be that as well.
Most of it will probably come out of the planning department, though.
Yeah, or the planning. Yeah, it really doesn't matter. It just has to be a municipal body, essentially.
Ray, is this what you wanted to comment on?
What?
Is this what you wanted to comment on?
Well, I think the point is, should I step up?
Yeah,
Yeah.
do the right thing.
Ray Breslin, 3 Gary Drive. I think all of this is really good, and you've done a nice presentation, and, but I think the town needs a plan moving forward on a lot of this stuff, and as far as grants, there is grant money available, and I think the town needs to seriously look at all this stuff, I mean, as far as grants, and see what's feasible, and as far as doing some studies, I definitely think we need to do some studies. And some of that grant money can be used for studies. So I think we have a lot of people willing to spend some time on this. I don't want to say too much because, but I personally go up to New Hampshire DES when they have a meeting, when they have groundwater and drinking water meetings, because I can, and anybody can. But I think perhaps we need more representation from the town personnel. But I'm just speaking as a citizen here. You know, so these issues are extremely important when we're talking about water or sewer, which is also water, only contaminated water. So we have a lot of things to look at as far as regulations and so forth. Maybe we need more regulations, but most important, what you brought up, is about educating the general public, because, like you say, a lot of people don't even know they have a septic system. They bought a house, they didn't even think about it. Maybe the realtor told them you have a well, there's a well pumps downstairs, and maybe didn't say much more than that. I personally have a septic system that I have pumped out 2 to 3 years, but it's old. It's the original one. By today's standard, it's probably not up to the current standards. But once again, for somebody to replace a septic system today, we're talking $12,000–$15,000, you know, because it's a whole different ballgame. So, thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thanks, Ray.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you for coming back.
Yeah, no, anytime. Thank you, guys. If you have any
Can I,
questions.
yeah, just the
Yeah.
last question, Emily, have you, in your experience, we are looking at, you know, doing more with town water and town sewer, and, you know, when you're digging a hole, have you, in your experience, worked with that kind of a situation where a town's looking at both sewer and water systems? And, you know, how does it work?
In terms of
Well, are there synergies to be had by,
doing it together,
yeah,
doing it at the same time, that type of question? Yeah. Yes, I think so, but also not. It's like one of those that it's, you know, there's such different, there's some of the infrastructure that's gonna be, you know, you're digging the road up, so doing 2 things at once makes sense
Right.
to do instead of one thing and then digging the road up again, but they're different. They're going to different places and
Yeah,
it's different
right.
infrastructure. So it's, you know, sometimes it's really just comes down to funding, and getting those things funded together is often difficult. So, yeah. But I'm happy to come back at any point if you have any, or answer any questions at any point. If you guys have, feel free to reach out by email to me, or through Amy.
And
if you have
there's
any
a
questions.
narrative written report that goes,
yeah.
that you're just,
And it's on our website,
oh, okay, good.
it's on the Conservation Commission page of the website.
When you have properties that have a well and public sewer,
Yes.
is there a risk of depleting the groundwater because you're not recharging?
No, they're still recharging. It's recharging just, you know, regular, like through rainwater, which should be enough.
Yeah.
And those wells, they should be okay. But that's a valid question, because it seems like it's not quite the same balance, but yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no, it should be okay, depending on where you are. And we did the groundwater assessment, and overall, you know, that was 3 or 4 years ago now, but that, you know, that doesn't seem to be a huge concern currently, so. All right.
Great.
All right, thank you all.
Thank you.
Next up is 33 Londonderry Road.
Good evening. My name is Michael Malinowski. I'm with Allen and Major Associates.
Thank you.
Thank you.
By that all the time.
With me this evening is Scott Fawcett. He is the applicant and property owner. We are here before you to file for a site plan amendment. I believe many of you have seen this property. In the past, we were here about 2 years ago to do some parking lot rehabilitation on the property. That work had not been completed. Mr. Fawcett has since purchased the property and is in the process of moving his operations here. As many of you know, that property consists of about 15 commercial condo suites. Majority of them, the previous ones, were auto repair shops. There was a cabinet company in there, light manufacturing. Moving forward, the vast majority of those have been relocated, and Mr. Fawcett is moving his business into that, which will be primarily office space, some light fabrication to support his operations, as well as some material storage for his business. Part of why we are here before you is for the construction of a covered loading dock, as you can see on the plan at the top of the page. It takes up suites 3 and 5. There's existing overhead doors in the back of the building. You can see from the color elevations that were provided. That is primarily why we are here. In addition to that, we are also removing approximately 1,500 square feet of impervious surface. A little bit in front of the overhead doors for the loading docks, as well as a large portion to the north of the property. There are approximately 4 condo suites there. All of those have overhead doors. If you drive by on the highway, you'll see. Part of the proposal is to change out those overhead doors with glass storefronts to make a more inviting office space for customers. Existing pavement will remain the same, primarily just restriping to reallocate spaces and provide a cleaner access around the building. The proposal before you shows for 60 parking spaces where 58 are required. Single direction traffic around the building towards the north, around the back. There are some wetlands on the property. It is the extension of the drainage swale that comes off of 93. So between our property and Interstate 93, there's a very large drainage swale that is piped beneath the portion of our property and discharges to the south back under Londonderry Road. There are no proposed improvements in that area. We are simply removing some additional pavement towards the middle of the property. So that is the limits of the excavation. Existing utilities are water and sewer. Those will all remain the same. There's no proposed changes to those. As you can see from the colored elevations, I believe everybody has a packet of those. Mr. Fawcett is also proposing to beautify the exterior of the building, fresh coat of paint, and some facade work to beautify the building. Be happy to answer any questions that the Concom may have.
If you weren't required to have 58 parking spaces, you know, by our site plan regs, would you have less?
It would be just open the property has had many more parking spaces. There's a vast amount of pavement that's on the property. We're simply just restriping for that. We're not proposing any new pavement. The previous proposal had quite a bit more parking, particularly along the front of the building. we don't need that space. So it's just, it helps with circulation around the front of the building. So there's not much we can do short of tearing out pavement. But at this point, it adds, it provides enough parking for the uses that are going in, which is 58. We have 60 spaces shown.
So the motivation for removing the 1,500 square feet? Just,
It's more to beautify, so the vast majority of it is going down at the end of the bays, and we're changing that from overhead doors that they are currently. Most of these were old suites where it was contractor yards. So you had an overhead bay in the back, small office in the front that faced Londonderry Road. Their business model does not need that. They need more of a showroom and nice office space. So what we're proposing to do is infill those overhead doors with glass storefronts. So make them nice, inviting office space. And that's particularly more important now that the interstate has grown. This property actually had quite a bit of its frontage taken away to the west by eminent domain when they widened out 93. So now that face of the building is extremely visible from the highway. As if many of you have driven 93 North, you see the back of that building. So part of the proposal is to beautify specifically that side of the building. Yes, ma'am.
How are you accessing the units, and how does that access for people relate to where the parking is?
So the vast majority of the parking will be in the back, and that's for
Right.
customers, or for staff. There are some customer parking along the front. There is access along Londonderry Turnpike, or Londonderry Road. You will see that there's a covered canopy and some ADA spaces along the front of the building. There will be...
Actually, I don't. Sorry about that.
That's okay. So we still have a main entrance here and some parking, parallel parking along the front. So there will still be access here. These access will be more of a secondary access for staff to get into the building.
Okay.
But all of this space here, like these overhead doors, that'll be for staff, construction operations.
Just curious.
Okay. And as you can see by sort of that picture, that's what I was describing as, those were the old overhead doors, and they'll be infilled with nice glass storefront. So they'll definitely beautify that facade of the building.
And that's facing 93?
This is what you'd see from 93. And then that's our over at the
Canopy.
overloading dock.
Any comments?
planning board should like it.
I have a quick question
Yes.
on the side that faces 93. There's a mention of new landscaped islands. Do you have a planting list for that?
We do. I believe it was included. It should have been the next sheet. There was a blow up, actually on the detail sheet, Amy, the last one, right there. So we do have a blow up of
Oh, yeah,
plantings.
page 3.
Oh, okay. I
Yep.
think I just have to zoom in, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, there it is. Okay, thank you.
There we go. So the first one where the facade work is being done, there will be plantings, some shrubbery. The secondary one is going to be lumen seed, and that's primarily going to be used, I'm going to put some picnic tables and stuff out there, and it'll be a nice seating area for staff to sit during warm months.
We good? All right, I think we're good.
All right? Sounds good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. My name is Paul Chisholm. I'm with Keach Nordstrom Associates. We're the engineers and surveyors of record for the project. Plan before you tonight is a subdivision of the properties located at 10 and 13 Sheridan Drive. Those properties are owned by Bill and Gail Gardocki, who are behind me over here, and then their son Tom, who's also here tonight. Bill and Gail own the house that's existing on the lot at 10 Sheridan at the end of the Sheridan Drive cul-de-sac, and then Tom owns the house directly adjacent on the left-hand side of the sheet there. Basically, the Gardockis have lived on the property for quite some time. They actually used to run a landscaping business out of the other end of the property. There's an existing garage right in this area, and there's some gravel laydown areas in areas that they had used in years past to run the business out of there, including a gravel driveway which actually goes on the northwest corner of the site all the way to Old Dairy Road. Basically, the plan here is to subdivide these properties so that there's 3 additional building lots out of it. So the existing house for Bill and Gail will remain just on a smaller lot. The existing house for Tom and his wife will remain with a slight sliver taken out of it in this section here to give a little bit of frontage to one of the new lots. And then 2 adjacent lots that will be accessed from Old Dairy Road. Effectively, there is town water on Sheridan, not on Old Dairy. In talking with Manchester Waterworks, what they would like us to do is connect in. This house is already on water. This one is on well. Connect this house into the well. This new house will also be, into the water. This new house here on this lot will also be serviced by water. And then the 2 coming from Old Dairy will have to be wells. They don't like water lines running through properties to access other properties. I guess it creates a maintenance issue for them. All the properties are going to be on septic as well, and we do have a little stormwater area kind of in this section right here, just to handle and mitigate, obviously, the effects of development on the property. I'll keep it short and sweet and answer whatever questions you have.
Is this a design review?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I concur with the recommendations of the staff. Some of the things that doesn't really, it's not out of our wheelhouse, but it all makes sense. Maybe it would be worth just asking you what the plan is for dealing with the encroachment?
You're talking about the encroachment of the building here?
Yeah.
I believe, I don't know if you guys, Gail, you wanna?
I'm not sure I
They're-
understood the question.
They're asking the encroachment, so the gentleman's shed here, that comes over your property line?
Yes, our understanding is it does cross our property line a little bit, yes.
Are you gonna ask him to move it, or?
We weren't going to.
He's a good neighbor. We think it's only a couple feet, so,
We'll of course continue to, if staff has issues with that or would like to see that cleaned up, of course, I'm sure you'd be willing to
Oh,
handle it in a
yes.
couple of different ways,
Oh,
depending on
yes.
whatever makes the most sense.
yes.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah,
I mean,
and he's a good neighbor. We're friends, so.
I mean, as long as the engineers are out there, and the surveyors, it might be the time to do a lot line adjustment, and get it resolved that way.
What kind of structure did you say that was? I think it's not necessarily, it's not like a garage, like with the foundation and everything, right?
It's the Quonset hut,
Yep.
right?
Yeah, so it could be moved easily.
Yeah, I can-
Probably wouldn't become an issue until you went to sell. And then it could potentially.
Yeah, truthfully, it really hasn't, we've had a lot of talks with staff. I think this really dates back 2 years. We've kind of been
Yes.
working on this. It hasn't really come up yet, more than, oh, hey, what's that over there, There's been a multitude of other things we've had to kind of work our way through on this one. So if they're at the point where they're obviously looking at this closer now during design review and they have different thoughts, different ideas on that, we can certainly handle that in a number of different ways.
It's over on the next-
Have you-
I think they're open to it.
Have you done a survey of the property?
Oh, yeah, this is fully surveyed.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
So you're the guys that discovered the encroachment.
We are, much to everyone's surprise, yes.
There were no wetlands on the property. Is that-
There actually is, very small areas. There's a little bit of, runoff and drainage from Sheridan Drive that's kind of piped into an area of small wetlands here and drains through the property, basically by pipe. And there's a pipe outlet that drains, in outlets to the surface right in this location and just onto the back and down towards Old Dairy Road. It's really kind of drainage that has formed into a wetland over the years, more so than anything. But that is what's existing out there, very small pockets and
Is
channels.
that less than what would kick off or?
Absolutely, yeah, much less, yep. Yep. Even still, part of the design, again, having shared driveway off of Sheridan, is gonna split off and go around. We're obviously not impacting, there's no need to really go near those. So they're very easy to avoid on this one.
Have you considered using the rain garden instead of the detention pond? So it doesn't look so industrial?
So I think they're gonna plant it, but to add in the filter course for it, we have a depth issue where it's a very shallow site in some senses. Part of the issues that we've had with the property is just getting the drainage to work for it. Part of the problem is the lowest point of the property is here. This is about a 50-foot wide section that goes back 200 feet or so. Until it opens up obviously into the larger piece, and we've had to play and regrade with that to balance the runoff going to Old Dairy Road versus what's not. And obviously we're limited in how far we can grade up or down because there's limitations to either side of the driveway. So the pond itself is gonna be dry. Certainly they could plant it with those types of plantings, but to add in the actual filter course would actually be a little bit of an issue when actually outletting the pond to the lowest portion of the property up here, which is where the vast majority of the site drains off today. So we did explore a couple different options there. This one just seemed to fit the best in terms of not just horizontally, but also vertically as well.
So will the landscaping business sort of be discontinued now that there's not the space to store product and whatnot?
That's correct. In fact, they've sold the business already, and no operations currently happen on there today. I think it's been a year or
years.
two now. Yeah, 2 years.
2 years.
Since the operations actually moved off-site to a different property at that point. So really today it's, it just has kind of looked about the same. They've got some solar panels out there for the house. The barn is used for storage. They've got different equipment and stuff like that in there. So it's going to be, the barn is going to stay and be incorporated basically as a garage to one of the houses. But obviously the stockpile areas are gone. The gravel will be, not removed, but planted over, loamed in seed, that sort of thing.
So there's no intent to restore this area that you were using into like a more natural setting, because it's gonna basically become lawns for the new house
Exactly.
lots, is that-
Yeah, and really, the family, what they're looking to do is, they have another, I guess, daughter and son-in-law who are looking to move into one of the houses. Bill and Gail are gonna sell their house, build a new house there, and then same thing with Tom. So really, the family's looking to kind of consolidate into the 3 new ones and sell off the two existing ones. So it's gonna be their own
compound.
little area.
Yeah.
Yeah, family compound, absolutely.
So that's when that shed's gonna become an issue.
They've already worked it out, believe it or not. I feel like they thought of that before, probably pretty early on.
Yes. We good?
Yeah.
Another one? Too easy.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, everybody. Have a great evening.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
I don't know that I have any old business. Anybody else have anything other than, I guess it was, did we talk about the Adams Trail last time, the flooding?
I don't remember.
No?
I don't remember.
Adams Trail has been flooded to the point that it's unusable. It's been that way for 2 months at least. It's quite deep. There was some of the old boardwalk from the South Orchard. When they replaced it, they cut it up and put it down at the northern trailhead. It was so far underwater that when Trailways came in and put the new trails back behind the building here, they scavenged it, so the water's 6 to 10 inches deep at least, if not more.
Figure out what's going on?
There's that culvert that runs from Max Pond to Adams Pond that has plugged in the past. Andy used to just take care of it. I don't think it happens every year, but it happens every couple of years. Kyle cleared it once, I think 2 years ago. Bob Rimmel said he thought it was last year. I wouldn't argue with him, he might be right. So he has requested that Kyle clear it. There's no indication that anything has happened.
Well, there was some email exchange today between Bob Rimmel and
Yeah,
Kyle.
and I haven't been over there today.
Kyle said his,
He said they'd been there for 5 days. I was there 3 days ago and there was nobody there.
yeah, but
Um,
Bob Rimmel offered some
Some sort of
greenhouse
pipe.
tube
Yeah.
piping, which I have no idea what that is. So,
Part of the issue, in my mind, is that all of the former parking on Max North Orchard and South Orchard is barricaded and has been since last fall. So unless you can walk to it from your home, the South Orchard is no longer accessible by the public. The Adams Pond Trail is no longer accessible by the public because the only way to get to it is from the South Orchard without swimming. So, as far as the town having paid Andy for conservation value, that's still there. The town having paid for that conservation value to include access to the public is not there. You can get to the North Orchard if you park on the other side of Pillsbury Road. You can park at the kindergarten, you can park at the Morrison House, you can park at the church when they're not having services. Then you can access the North Orchard, but that's it. And if you can walk a couple miles, you can make it to the South Orchard. There's no parking on Adams Road because there's no shoulder. I forget the name of it, there's a dead-end street off the west side of the South Orchard, and there's room for a couple to a few cars to park there without being in somebody's front yard.
And I've
lawn.
noticed they somehow have created a couple parking spaces on, I think it's the gas line that comes through Adams Road.
That's been there. It can get quite wet and deep, so if you don't have a pickup truck, I wouldn't advise it. I went in there with my Volkswagen once and it wasn't good. I didn't need to be towed, but it was close. So in dry weather, yes, you could
Yeah.
probably get 3 or 4 cars in there. And then there's room for a single, maybe 2 cars off Adams Road at the old access road that's a little bit further to the east. But that also has become very wet over the last couple of years. And a tree fell across part of it, so some of it's not accessible anymore. So that dialogue has been going on, just trying to, the email as of yesterday, Kyle said he was working on it, that's great. proof
So
of it.
would clearing the culvert solve the problem?
Yes,
Yeah,
historically it has.
yeah.
If he clears the culvert. Bob mentioned the possibility of beaver activity. I didn't see it, because usually you see all the saplings chewed down when that happens, and
Yeah, right.
that's not happening on the side I could access. I wasn't willing to wade through it, so there might be a beaver working on saplings on the other side, but I didn't get back there. Usually it's just crud. It's branches and stuff that fall over the course of the winter, and they get into the culvert and block it up. And
So the small wetland is unable to drain into the, actually it's Indian Brook, I guess.
the Adams Pond Trail is getting, the Mac Pond that has the picnic tables and stuff around it is running across the Adams Pond Trail.
Instead of under the
Right.
culvert,
And it's done that before, but I've never seen it as deep as it is this year. I also can't then get to Adams Pond from there to see how deep it is. Is Adams Pond that high? I would think with a dam, no, it can't be. So
yeah.
there has to be a drop, I would think, but the entire trailhead area is flooded. So you can't get to anything else unless you're willing to go shin deep or more.
I wonder if it's a design flaw to the inlet, to the culvert from.
Probably, it's not, it's
that it
been
could
in
be
bad shape
resolved
for.
permanently by, I don't know.
It's been in bad shape for a long time. There's a structure, a metal structure there that may have been some sort of weir or something that's been visibly damaged for years. So I think right now it's just an underwater pipe. Large pipe, probably 24-inch, 18 to 24 inch.
Wasn't that pond a big issue many years back? Is that the one where the dam was?
That's Adams Pond itself.
Adams Pond was an
Oh,
issue,
okay.
and so they had to take some of the controlling boards out of it to drop the layer of it, drop the level of Adams Pond. And the last time I saw it, that was still happening. And there's, again, over the course of the winter, there's some brush and logs and stuff that have washed up against it, so it's probably 6 or 8 inches higher than they'd like it to be, but it's not enough to get too worried about. But you can actually see part of this stream going from Max Pond across the trail. That whole area is flooded. And it doesn't take much to do it.
See, it was ditched.
So where you don't see the water going across to Adams Pond is where the culvert is. Yeah, right about there. And that entire area is underwater.
Bob, how long would you say it's been underwater?
6 weeks for sure, and if somebody said 3 months, I wouldn't doubt it. As soon as we didn't get a good freeze this year, and we got a whole lot of rain, so
Yeah, that's the problem.
the level's been high for a long time. It has never self-corrected. The times it's gotten bad before, somebody had to go in and clean it out. So, like I say, my issue is, it may mean nothing. When I first saw that the boardwalk was gone, I thought, we've really got a problem here. But then Trailways said, no, we did that.
Well, we still need it though, right? If we
Yeah,
get the problem fixed, we'll need it again.
yes, it was useful. Mike Byerly worked with Trailways to get that put in a few years ago, because even when it's draining properly, there's a stretch through there of maybe 20, 30 feet that's always kind of muddy, and the boardwalk fixed that.
I wonder if there's any grant programs that would help correct that.
Don't know.
Well, trails out of,
That's a little
natural
wetter.
resources, Department of Natural
Yeah,
Resources.
so
This is
there-
April 9th this year.
Yeah.
Wow.
It wasn't that dry April 9th. It may look that way in the it does look that way in the overhead, but it was solidly flooded by then.
Did you just rotate it?
I did,
That's impressive.
and you're looking at it from an angle.
It looks
Oblique
like it's
angle.
probably just the weedy stuff is in the water
It
and
almost
everything,
looks like
pictures.
the
Yeah.
culvert collapsed underneath the road.
It's possible.
Notice its lowest, it's
Right there, yeah.
Yeah. There's a low spot there that it's going over, and I'm betting that's where the culvert is.
How did,
Culvert's collapsed, gone down under it, and so it's, might be 2 feet entrance, but it's probably
was that a,
8 inches underneath that road.
was that a work road? What was the reason for putting the culvert in the first place? Does anybody
Adams
know historically?
Adams Pond looks like it was probably a farm road. It was probably how they, I don't know how long ago, probably how they accessed the South Orchard.
Yeah, that's what I would say.
It's at least 8 to 10 feet wide all the way down.
The best angle.
So, yeah, I hadn't really thought about that, but yeah, I think it was a farm road to get to the South Orchard once.
You know, I wonder if a septic tank service could run their camera in through that culvert and get a good idea what exactly is going on.
I mean, typically, the Adams Pond side of the culvert is usually above water level. You can see it.
Hmm.
You
You
can't
can
see
look
it.
right in there.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to be
Get
way
wet.
steep to get to it.
Put on your
but-
waders.
But the last time I saw it, that I remember, you could see the Adams Pond side of it. It was visible above the water level, or at least partially above the water level. The Max Pond side is, and except during the really bad drought, is always below water. But as a resource for outdoor activity and like, it doesn't exist right now. Nor does the South Orchard at all, unless you can come from the neighborhood that abuts it and walk through.
Well, the good news is we've got a group interested in working on it.
Yeah.
Because there was several people on that email,
Yeah, Trailways contacted you, it looked like.
yeah. And then Bob contacted Kyle.
Yep.
So,
The last I saw was Bob today. Bob asked Kyle, Kyle said they'd had people there for 5 days. And Bob said, I was just there and I don't see any difference. And that, if he was just there today, he's been there a day more recently than I was. I was there yesterday.
yeah. So,
Yesterday, it was unchanged.
I guess stay tuned. We'll
Yeah.
see if we can get that rectified. It'd be good if it was, you know, a permanent fix that functioned the way it was supposed to.
Yeah, I mean, it is a recurring problem.
Right,
It didn't start with Kyle. It's been
Exactly.
doing this for years.
right. We,
I have a new business
Okay.
comment. Northern Woodlands Magazine, I have picked up my stack of magazines and started looking at things. It's the winter of '22. There's an article called Working Land Aids At-Risk Species. And it was written by John Litvatus, who is at UNH. You might have heard his name, biology. Anyway,
Big on
it kind of lays out why we're clearing these areas that we have been clearing. And I thought it would be a great thing for people that weren't here when we were doing the original project to find out what our thinking was and why they're doing it. In addition to just working with us, the Conservation Commission, the whole project was geared to try to work with landowners too and get them on board so they would keep some of the brushy areas. Anyway, there's nice pictures of birds and things. You can go into Northern Woodlands Magazine and go to the Winter '22 issue and find it. I could also send the link. I wasn't sure if you had to be a subscriber to get into the magazine, but apparently you can get some things just that
Okay.
way. So if I send you the link,
And then I can,
you
yeah,
can send it to
share it,
everybody.
yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was a really good article, so.
Well, and that ties in to if we can have Heidi come, to talk about the bunny cut and
Right.
what else it's doing
Yeah, and
besides bunnies.
this is covering a lot of bases. It
Yeah.
talked about spotted turtles, it talked about somebody else. I can't remember who the other.
Well, the big thing I think everybody noticed was the birds, the amount of birds.
Well, that's
that-
just, yeah.
That
yeah.
reappeared after a long absence.
I'd like to go out there, now that I use Merlin, I'd like to go out there and turn that on and see what's out there. Because I can't see them,
Yeah.
forget that. Anyway, it was a good article.
Mike got information on a boat launch grant.
Yes. The state is, well, it's actually through the American Rescue Plan, if you remember that one, during the COVID crisis. So
yeah.
they allocated a bunch of money to the states to do infrastructure projects. I mean, basically, I think the idea is keep the economy going, but it's run in a special office that's just dedicated to COVID funding. But they are offering grants to improve boat launches. And specifically, I'm thinking of the boat launch on Scobie Pond, which needs a lot of improvement. since
It's just
But
a
it's not
beach,
there.
right?
yeah, then that's a kind of a problem, because they want to think that there's something there. So there are some reasons to call it a boat launch. It is on the list published by New Hampshire Fish and Game of boat launches in the state, providing access to state ponds. So that's a good thing. But Marge was kind enough to do some research and get a quote. There is if you've been up to Massabesic, across from Town Hall, the boat launch there, you could have seen it. You don't have, did you have the photos of the boat launch itself or no?
Oh, yeah.
If you scroll down, they're there.
So this is the one in Massabesic, but this is basically what we would be talking about here. So it's actually 14 feet wide at the deep end, and that structure at the end, you put your kayak in there, and you use
You
your
go down,
paddles.
if you go down one more, there's a close-up.
Put your paddles in those notches, and basically pull yourself in your paddle,
Right.
along that little chute, and you go down into the water, and you don't have to get the crap that's on your feet in the water, basically. So they really like it at Massabesic because of it being a water supply.
Mhm.
But it is a way to get your kayak out into the water without dragging it across the beach, which is it's basically mud.
But you still have to drag it.
You have to get it to the dock.
You have to carry it out
So
there,
if you've
right?
got
But
Well, the,
people with
Well, if you go
disabilities,
back to-
children or seniors, to feel confident transferring the water,
Well, the
doesn't
one,
make me feel
the-
confident.
the one they're
thing-
showing in the picture is more sophisticated than the one here.
right,
It has a platform that extends out over the kayak, that little mechanism.
see the thing in the middle that looks like a diving board?
Yeah,
That's the contraption that gets somebody from a wheelchair to their kayak.
well,
And then there's a metal, it looks like a ladder sticking up on the side. That's some handhold, and it supports that little diving board.
Yeah, there's one more like that. I forget which pond it is, but I think it's in Pelham. They've got a small pond that has the full rig on it.
Yeah, but it almost doubles the price to add that.
Yeah,
However, we know there's a wheelchair guy on Brewster Road who had mentioned that he would love to see a dock there that he could fish off.
mhm,
This could do that for him. I don't think, it doesn't necessarily need that ADA conversion for him to fish,
right.
but if there was an opportunity to provide an ADA kayak, you know, would that be something we'd want? Or is there a reason why Auburn didn't do it? You know what I mean?
Probably money,
I
yeah.
think there's a wetlands permit involved,
Oh,
for
for
sure.
sure,
and
for-
that's
absolutely.
gonna add to the cost.
Well, in Auburn was done very explicitly. There are signs everywhere, don't touch the water.
Oh, yeah, it's
It was done
totally
to keep
that.
kayakers from touching the water.
Right, right. Yeah, this would be
Well,
more
that
for
is
the,
not-
just the convenient, to avoid dragging, people and boats across the muddy bank and,
And the
bringing
vegetation,
sediment
yeah.
into the, yeah, right.
That space we have there is only 50 feet wide.
Right.
Yeah, that would be an issue, is that
Well, with the,
Auburn is a big boat ramp, and so the trailered boats can launch right beside it. and it
Right
does-
beside it,
In
exactly.
fact, some of them even tie up to the
Because I
side.
went and took pictures of Scobie Pond and sent them to the guy who gave me the estimate, and he said, oh yeah, this is perfect.
Yeah, so we might.
It floats.
I don't know if people do launch trailer boats at that ramp. I mean,
I don't think,
you could launch a 12 or 14-foot John boat or something.
yeah,
yeah. I've seen people back in trailers.
Yeah,
up-
so if
up
we were to
there.
do this, we'd want to
But,
shove it to one side probably,
right.
so they could still
I
do
think
that.
it could be,
Yeah.
but it would be tight, because like I
Yeah.
said, you only have 50 feet, and, this goes out into and gets bigger.
Yeah,
If you have it right on the proper line, is somebody gonna get fussy because out in the water, it's really, in front of theirs?
right.
So we'd have to be
How wide is that?
cautious.
Oh,
It's 14 feet, I thought he
yeah, 14 feet at the wide end, and we have 50 feet of frontage,
So there's room.
yeah.
so it should fit, I mean.
And the thing I didn't know is, do they take that up in the winter, or they
Yes.
just let it?
It-
it
Massabesic pulls it in the winter.
They do? I
Yeah.
would think so.
In fact, it's not in yet. They've opened.
No, it is, because I went out and took pictures.
Oh, then it's just,
Um,
because they opened the ramp weeks ago.
So, I know sometimes there's just a system that elevates the dock on the metal poles that are holding it in,
Well, this
and
this
then
one
it slides
floats.
back down.
Yeah, this
Right.
one just floats. I
But
think it floats
You
every
have
day.
to,
Massabesic physically removes it, and I don't know how they do it. I don't know how many people it takes. And I don't know that you need to. I don't know what would happen to it if you left it to freeze in.
well, the guy who gave me the quote is just in Hudson.
Okay.
There's a ramp that gets you onto that, which doesn't show via the top right of this picture.
Right.
If you got, you get the photographs of the,
The photo,
yeah,
yeah,
right there.
there's a concrete pad, that's the first thing.
So you can see the poles that the the dock floats on, so the
Right.
water level can change. I don't know about how it would accommodate ice, but then the rest of it, you could just
Lift it
flip
up.
up, it's on a hinge, and,
I think
I'm
we
ju-
would have to look at the long-term investment of time and energy.
Well, this was part of the grant, was what is your maintenance plan?
Yeah,
Yeah. If we were gonna pull it, somebody's gonna have to do that.
so we should ask,
and find a place to put it.
And find a place to put it.
the vendor about,
Yeah, because he was,
Whether-
he was familiar, he knew all about the Auburn one, so I think
yeah, right.
he was the one that was,
So there is a $100,000 limit on this grant, and there's a 25% match requirement. The dock, as they bid it to us, which is without the handicap stuff, includes installation, was pretty much a turnkey operation, transportation there, and about $25,000, which would mean that our contribution would have, they would give us 75% of that, we'd give 25%. I could imagine there would have to be a little work done on the shore itself.
And the wetland permit.
Yeah, for sure, a wetland permit. Hopefully fairly minor, but,
And the concrete pad.
yeah.
Potentially pad it with maintenance for the next X number of years.
Yeah, I don't know how that would work, but
Yeah,
we could, I don't know, I don't think the grant would cover that, we would have to probably cover that. But, if the application is due at the end of the month, so I'm filling it out as if we could go, forward with this, we don't have to. We can turn them down, but he told me that they only had like 2 and possibly 3 applications so far, and if it's due at the end of the month, I don't know how many more are gonna come in.
So is this the end, the last round of the grant?
I would think so, because it's COVID grant, it's COVID.
I don't know, I just feel a little responsible for voting to do this and then finding out that, just to get the grant, and then finding out it's a bigger project than we maybe want to manage.
Well, I think we'd have to do some due diligence between
Well,
now and.
I know, and then,
we can apply for it, but we don't have to take it.
Yeah, we don't have to accept the grant. If we,
Marge, the guy you're talking to, obviously, if he's quoting installation, so he knows what it takes to get it there and install it.
Right.
So if his company is in the business of pulling them out in the winter, he might be the guy,
yeah, good.
and
Yeah.
he could tell us what that's gonna cost.
Yeah, I can ask him.
You know, for X dollars a year, I'll pull it out in the winter and put it in the spring.
The big thing about taking it out in the winter for SCOBY is you don't have a lot of current coming right through there. The problem you have with something like this in the winter is when the ice is moving
Yeah,
and it just takes it out. The one that the Boy Scouts tried to put in at Kendall Pond, that didn't survive the first winter. And I've seen some other ones like that, they pull them in the fall because in the winter, the ice is gonna move.
Yeah.
But SCOBY,
really nowhere to
don't have
go.
that much flowage right there.
Yeah.
It's not a huge volume. I don't know if the engineering of it would require a certain thing.
Well, and
Which-
is the boat ramp Londonderry conservation land?
Yes.
So,
No,
Actually,
it's
isn't-
town. It's,
The town
Well,
line.
it's
the
town
road.
land, but I think it actually was purchased with Fish and Game funds.
right, that was the
little
big
50-foot
controversy,
wide
yeah.
Sliver.
what I'm thinking is if we were allowed to, we might simply pull this thing out of the water and leave it in the ramp area in the winter.
Oh, yeah.
And then,
And-
so there's no transportation involved.
There's other docks on Scobie Pond, right?
Private
Yeah.
docks.
Yeah.
And I can't remember if they're floating and pulled out or
oh,
if they're
so
fixed.
you're gonna, the wetland's gonna require a dock permit,
Yeah.
not just,
Just the wetlands.
yeah. And there's all, I can't quote anything, but there's all new rules and regs on that.
Mm.
But they're good. I mean, there's it's no longer, there's no longer arguments about whether it was there or not 25 years ago. They said, okay, we're starting the rules on this date and forget everything that happened before that. So it's pretty much more straightforward.
So I'm just looking for a consensus. Should I keep working on this application or do we not have an interest in it? I think, it'd be a good,
I think it'd be a good project.
I do
Yeah,
too.
Absolutely.
What do we want to even fool with the ADA part, or,
Is that something that can be added at a later date,
yeah,
or
that's it.
do we want to put it in the grant anyways?
That's what I was thinking.
well, the trouble with putting in the grant is then we've obligated ourselves to another,
Maintenance.
$10,000. I mean,
Oh, yeah,
it's 25% of 25,000 plus, well, let's call it 35,000 by the time we, put the concrete pad in and,
Hey, the
yeah,
wetlands
pay
permits and
the
stuff.
wetland scientists and all that. So, we're gonna pay
$9,000.
$9,000.
And while it's,
And then if you put another 25,000 on that, it's,
Which there may be a grant specific to ADA that would pay for that at a future.
well, you can make an argument that the one like at Massabesic without that feature still improves accessibility. Somebody that was moderately healthy in a wheelchair, it would be much easier to get a wheelchair up on that floating dock
Sure.
and get into a kayak than it would be to crawl through the mud at Scobie to get to a
right,
kayak.
right, yeah.
By
exactly.
definition, this thing is putting the kayak in water that's deep enough to float. You don't have to deal with the shoreline.
Right.
The other thing about being ADA, if you really think about it, you gotta have that concrete pad, it's gotta extend in to wherever the person gets their wheelchair out of their car.
Right.
Yeah.
And, yeah. Yeah, it's,
Okay, we solved that problem, didn't we?
I mean, it'd be nice, but I think it's, you gotta,
We-
this is the argument that, unfortunately, handicapped people make all the time is, you're spending a lot of extra money on not many people, but there are still people.
Yeah.
So. but I
And
think
maybe,
it's
once we get a feel for how much maintenance is required for this thing, then we can think about improving it.
Yeah, right. I mean, another thing is if you're gonna put in a handicap kayak launch site, would you wanna do it on Scobie Pond?
Yeah, true.
I mean,
Yeah.
they paddle around it in 5 minutes, so.
Well, but we don't have a whole lot of other options. I mean,
Yeah, not
That's
town,
what-
we don't.
not in Londonderry. I just, I think it's an interesting idea. I just want to be sure we really know what our commitment's going to be before we go too crazy.
Did you have a contact up in Auburn that might be able to give us
I
some
didn't,
insight?
I just,
I mean, that's right, you Googled it, right?
got, it was so easy to tell who the manufacturer was, that, I requested a, fill in the blank quote, and then the next day, the guy called me, and he was from Hudson. I was like, super. And he said, send me some pictures of the site. So I ran over to Scobie, took some pictures, and he says, yep, that would be perfect, and sent me the
Yeah.
quote right the next day.
I could use those pictures for the application, by the way, on
Yeah.
the site, so.
All right, yeah.
So I'm just thinking, we have another meeting before
The end of the month.
the end of the month, so we could come back with some more answers about longer-term costs.
Mm-hmm.
And we could take a vote next time, because we'll have to obligate the funds if we're gonna make the
Right.
application.
Okay, let me, see what more I can get from him. I think that's all I have.
New business, I don't know if anyone else has heard of this or not, and wanna make sure I get the wording of it quite right. It's called, I think it's called the Twin States Green Line Project, something like that. And it was originally proposed as an alternative to Northern Pass, to bring hydropower from Canada down to Massachusetts. But this one here, what I heard the other day is that they've gone to the feds for a grant under the infrastructure improvement plan and stuff to build this project in. It's gonna come down mostly on existing power line rights of way, through Vermont and New Hampshire, and some of it along the roadways and stuff, to terminate at a new substation in Londonderry, New Hampshire.
Oh,
Really?
Yeah, it's supposed to be coming down the National Grid line, which National Grid still owns that one piece of property at the end of Musquash, where we have several trails. So I don't know if that goes through, if it's going to impact some of our trails out there.
can you get the name of the project to Marge? I mean, I knew that Sununu's talked about reinstating something, but I never heard
He came out in support of it, yeah.
yeah,
So
and I
it's
never
Just
heard
buried down
Londonderry.
in the bottom, it says it ends in a terminus at a new plant in Londonderry, or a new distribution site in Londonderry.
Chances are there's a plan or
Yeah.
something online somewhere.
Well, there's a plan online.
Yeah.
But if
It
you
doesn't
get another right
show
name.
anything about Londonderry, it just shows this blob coming across the, from Litchfield into Londonderry, and then it stops.
Where does it start? Is it Hydro-Quebec or?
Yeah, well, it's somewhere up in Canada, I'm not sure exactly where.
Because they just got some good approvals on a line that's gonna run down through Lake Champlain,
Yep, that's the
Underground.
same one.
Faster,
between-
good.
same one?
Well, it's
Because that one's
similar,
going,
the one coming down through Lake Champlain is gonna terminate in New York State.
right, it's going down the Hudson River.
This one comes down through Vermont and goes under the Connecticut River. They're gonna bore it under the
Twin
river,
States.
so they're not gonna
Wow.
disturb the river at all. And then it pops up, and I'm not sure exactly where it enters into New Hampshire now. This is just something one little link I had from New Hampshire Business Review, and I clicked on it, and it shows this
New
overall view of
substation
it.
in London, that's on the map.
Well, you got it there somewhere?
I do, yeah.
What's the official name?
Twin States Clean Energy Link.
Clean or green?
Clean.
Clean.
Clean, okay.
Interesting.
So where's the rest of New Hampshire?
Yeah, exactly.
I know this stuff stops
It's a
in
surprise.
Rumney,
Stops
the
kind of.
picture. Oh, where, there it is. Dunbarton.
Yeah, that's-
Dunbarton substation
Bedford.
to new substation in Londonderry.
So it's gonna have to go under the river then, that's what they just said.
It's western, northwest, right in the, with Litchfield. Okay.
You're right, it's a blob.
Yeah, the National Grid line comes down through Litchfield and into Londonderry.
And how did they go under the river already?
Back by the Cooper parcel?
I think it's a little west of that.
Yeah, further,
Yeah, it looks like it. Actually, it looks like,
You
this
know,
is
there's that little
interesting.
station there already.
It looks like it's in the gravel pit, is what it looks like.
yeah.
Yeah,
Which could be, I mean.
Right? Why wouldn't they do it?
Well, the Granite Ridge power line is right above the gravel pit,
Yeah, right.
or adjacent to it.
In fact, there is a small substation there, right?
I don't remember a station, I just remember the lines, but.
there is some sort of a
There-
small,
yeah,
Yeah, there is.
there's a small station that's not on our trail network, but near it. This would, I assume, be a pretty sizable substation.
Right around.
You're talking a bucket load of power.
yeah.
Lucky Seven Stables. That's your backyard, right?
Very close to there.
That's why I said, is it, coming, there's a big power line that
Well, can you put
intersects
the
Cooper, or almost to Cooper.
terrain map up?
No, you want the utilities line, right?
Well,
Let's,
I know,
let's
this
do
is,
satellite.
this is just, yeah.
Isn't there a power line that goes above the Merrimack in that general area near the Budweiser plant?
I think so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Across it, you mean?
Yeah, crosses,
Yeah.
crosses the Merrimack.
That's further down, you gotta go down. FD Web is big.
Oh. So somebody can take an action item to research this
Right
further and
around
you can move
there.
on.
Well,
Yes.
yeah.
I just brought it up as a,
Curiosity.
Well, no,
See,
I
there's
mean,
a-
it's,
something
there's
to be
a
aware of.
wash in
yeah,
there.
I mean, it may be something to act on here if we.
like I said, I first heard about this plan way back when Northern Pass was proposed.
Yeah.
And this was,
See, that's
was
where
National Grid's
that's where
alternative to Northern
I'm
Pass.
suggesting that it would be in
Oh.
the gravel pit.
And with Northern Pass
'Cause that we don't
conveniently
know.
out of the way. But that, I think that, I can't imagine coming down through Lake Champlain and the Hudson River and crossing.
Those are two different,
Wait,
they're not
that's-
really
that's the
connected.
power
They're
line
two
right
different
there.
power lines,
That
yeah.
would be the power line coming in.
But they're both coming from Hydro-Quebec or
By the-
whatever.
Yeah,
by-
right.
power line that runs right down through
So
here.
you think it's-
Parallel to the gravel pit.
Okay.
And
Yeah, that's the one I thought is Granite Ridge. And I
there's a
don't know where it
substation
goes.
right there.
Well, it goes down, it goes south. Oh, she's got it up too.
South of the gravel pit.
See, then that's where it comes together, that's Wiley Hill Road, which is the entrance to Mathis,
I still run this way.
where the two power lines cross. She's gone now. She's
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah, I'm following it up, just,
I'm worried about where it is when it's going down.
coming this way. This
Yeah,
is
see,
the one that
there's-
cuts through the
yeah.
musquash.
Yeah.
Yeah, several lines converge at Hickory Hill Trailhead.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's,
And that's the perfect access for,
Yeah, put a
ATVs.
substation right there, everybody will love it.
but that's gotta be close to where they want, of course, to where the blob is on the map.
25 miles would be buried. 110 miles of transmission would be located within current infrastructure.
See, this is what they should have done at the very beginning, instead of all the craziness they did.
Different company.
Yeah.
any other new business?
You do need to have a,
That was gonna be my next question. You wanna do minutes first?
Yeah, let's get that done.
Mike, I gave Kirsten your comments that you sent to me today, so those two comments are getting added in.
you get to check with Deb, or,
I have not checked with Deb. Did you see Mike's email?
It didn't, I saw it, but when I saw yours, it said we'll deal with this tonight, so I didn't
Okay.
read his email.
Line 136.
Did I say something I shouldn't have?
No. On line 136, he is suggesting that you change the explain to transfer. And will
I didn't know
transfer the
what-
land
Oh,
use change
I- yeah.
effects
I
at
think
the
you
end
were
of the year.
misquoted there, but I wasn't sure. If you.
Yeah, I said we'll be able to, I will explain the land use change tax at,
Okay,
when we have a print, next time.
so explain is the proper word.
Yeah,
Okay,
but not at the end of the year.
Right.
Next time we have a treasurer's report. At that point, it seemed more important to know how much money we had than to go through all the little details, which I wasn't able to send to you because I didn't get them sorted out until, and you were not there. One of those days, I think. But whatever. Explain is correct. At the next presentation or
Yeah, that's
something
where
like
the
that.
problem lies.
Report, at the next report. I did see that, and I just didn't write it down.
I would move we accept the minutes of April 25th as amended.
Second?
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? One. Motion passed. And we have another one. Oh, which reminds me.
I did not have any changes to this one.
Move we accept the minutes as presented?
Seconded?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion passed. I just checked my phone. I had a message from, oh no, never mind. It wasn't her. It was somebody Maryland. I was like, oh no, it was from them, but it was somebody else last name. I had a panic. I would accept a motion to go into non-public session per 91A:3, section 2D, for the purpose of discussing property acquisition.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor with a roll call vote?
I, Susan Mallon. I, Tiffany Maccarelli.
I, Gene Harrington.
I'm Marge Bedoy.
Present.
Yeah, just,
Jim Leary, present.
I guess I'm present too,
Yeah.
right?
Mm.
Mike
Been
Scott's
bumped.
present.
I, David Efi.
Hi, Deb Levens.
Bob Maxwell.
right, take it away.
I guess then I will accept a motion to close the non-public session.
So moved.
Second.
Do we need to actually do a roll call? Close or just,
No, not to
I don't
close
think
it.
so.
okay. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any objection? Any abstention? Passes.
And now you'd hand the gavel over to the chair.
All right, I'll hand the gavel back to the chair, and then I'll make a motion that we seal the minutes of the non-public session.
Second?
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain?
You weren't in favor, Marge, because you were recused.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
You have to abstain. I
Have
think.
it.
One abstain on that.
And on the closing the session as well, right?
Yes.
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 So I just need one more motion.
I move we adjourn.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.